cold turkey, yeah. Have a good night, Paula.
All right, Brenna, you let us know when you're ready.
Okay, we're good.
All right. Well, it is 3:01 and I will call the NDPHIT Board of Trustees meeting to order. And Brenna, I'm assuming you can just take roll
Yep.
off of the meetings from there. Perfect. So agenda, does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Okay, if I could get approval of the agenda, which I believe includes the September meeting minutes.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. All those opposed to the motion, please signify by saying aye. All right, motion carried. Heading on to the operational update, new enrollment, January groups. Did you want to kick that off, Kyle, in the discussion of what we were just
Sure.
chatting about, or, okay?
Sure, I will. So this came a little, I don't want to say late, but we sent out an additional piece of documentation that identifies, 6, organizations that, so what we did is we approved the rates, I don't remember which month it was, I'm gonna say September, for all the tiers. And so as we approach the meeting, as the administrator of the trust and you know, recognizing we're reporting to the board and trying to keep the board connected to what's happening, we had an internal discussion as these rates were changed based on plan design change that Brown and Brown had worked with these organizations, which is a positive thing, that we felt like it was necessary to communicate back to the board that had originally approved the rates, to recognize that there were 6 organizations that had their rates changed. And the purpose of that is twofold. One, I just feel like the board should know that if you're approving the original rates, you should approve any rate changes. It could be in the consent agenda and you could just pull it out if you wanted to have deeper discussion. The second piece of it is that we internally felt like it was an opportunity to have a brief discussion or a discussion of whatever length you want to have in regards to what are some of those design changes happening in the field, so that as we see the different tiers of rates, we begin to understand what changes people are making, and we as board members are more engaged and can communicate better for people that may be in our region that are asking us questions as board members about rate changes or how they can lower their changes, or the impact design changes are having for some organizations. So that was my thought and discussion for the board, and that's what I wanted to bring forward, is doing our job as the administrator of the trust and feeling like we needed to connect these dots for everybody and for discussion.
No, I appreciate that, Kyle. And again, just for the board members, we approved the tiers. The document that was sent were the 6 entities that decided to make some adjustments so their increases wouldn't be as high for the upcoming premium year. And we're not approving or how do I want to say this? We can't make really any changes to their plans because it was their decision on how they wanted to revise their plans, but more of a formality to be able to see what adjustments were made and accepting those rate adjustments on behalf of the board. I would be interested in knowing, you know, from a general sense, and we don't need to go into detail by detail unless board members want to, but what were some of the things that these entities did do to decrease their adjustment? Because I mean, some of them went down like 16%, which is a pretty substantial change from where they were. Randy, would you be able to share some of those?
Let me get one more thing before Randy, I don't want to wait for this because it's important to what you said. So the board has to recognize then, and it's okay with us, as the administrator that reports to the board, that you're delegating that authority to the consultant to make those decisions based on those changes. And just so that we understand, as the administrator of the trust, working with Brown and Brown, that you've delegated that authority once those rates are approved. And so that's what you're acknowledging then by saying we really can't change anything. So just so that we recognize why we're bringing this forward, to know who has the authority to do what as the administrator of the trust.
So are you saying, Kyle, from the standpoint, when you're looking at the initial tier that these 6 entities were in, and now that they've made adjustments to the plan, are we to look to find, or are we as a board, are you asking that we would be reviewing those changes and validating those final rate adjustments before approving them? I just want to make sure I'm clear.
That's up to you. I'm just, from our standpoint, as we work with Brown and Brown, there are a lot of things that come up on I'll say a weekly for sure basis.
Sure.
That we understand where that authority lies in making those decisions. So when you say that, there really isn't anything we can do about
Right.
these changes, then you're delegating that authority to Brown and Brown, and that's fine. We just want to understand that as the administrator of the trust.
So Kyle, from your standpoint, are you or have you been able to review what those changes have been with Brown and Brown as far as Seek as our administrator, to be able to verify that those percentages look correct based on the changes that the plan administrators made within those 6 entities?
No, we have not, but
Okay.
again, we aren't actuaries, so
Right.
we should really be able to understand that. We do believe that Randy and Brown have the best interest of the trust in mind. There is no reason for it. We're not bringing this forward because we don't trust Randy and we're saying he doesn't know what he's doing. We just want people to recognize, because there's a lot of things that go on from behind the scenes in regards to this trust, and we need to start understanding more as a board what authority we're delegating and what authority that we should take back, and how that's going to work in the long term, because it's a lot of money and there's risk involved in this process. And so that's what I'm trying to help the board develop and understand at a deeper level about what decisions are being made and where that should lie.
So I would be really curious to hear from our board members, where are you all at in this process, and what are your thoughts?
Well, this is Cole, and I think our initial thought is in order to make this plan healthy and not lose potential groups because of rate increases, we have to give as much educational information to make a judgmental decision. And I reached out to Dickinson Parks, who had the big 16% drop, and they went to a high deductible health plan because of what we did and what Randy had shared with them to save costs. So I think that's, in my mind, whoever's giving them the information to make good decisions so that they can save rates and not have to leave the plan because of the costs have gone drastically increased than they've ever had in the past. I think that we're doing is doing the right thing. Now, who should be responsible between Seek and Randy and his group? I mean, that's where I guess I'm looking for direction from the rest of the board, because I don't know the answer to that either.
And we aren't necessarily looking to make that decision. Jenny just pointed out there isn't anything we can do. And so that's fine. If that's how you want to approach it, I'm all good with that. I just want things communicated so the board understands the processes that are happening and becomes more educated. We're advocating for one thing or the other, outside of just communicating and you understanding what's going on in the trust.
Yeah, I do appreciate, Kyle, having this information being brought forward to the board, because if it wasn't, we would have had no idea that there were 6 entities that made major changes to their plan to be able to reduce their premiums. And so I think from that standpoint, it's important for the board to stay informed of those decisions that are being made, because we wouldn't know the difference. Like you said, there's a lot of behind the scene things that are going on that we may not be aware of. But major changes like this to someone's plan, I do think it is important for those, for that type of information to be brought forward to the board.
I would suggest that Randy shares some things just in general. I mean, to understand what kind of changes happen in order to make those percentages go down. I think that's valuable to the board to understand what's happening in the field.
Yeah, do you want me to share some ideas about how we approached it?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we do, there's really three things that we look at when you're making any plan change. One is the actuarial value, and what that really means is we've shared it, I think, before, in the idea that, if do you have a platinum plan, a gold plan, a silver plan, or a bronze plan? And the reason that the Affordable Care Act came out with that kind of modeling is, think about a platinum plan means that's what we call the 90th, between the 90th and 100% coverage element, which means the higher you go, the less out of pocket someone has. So there's these tables that describe to change a deductible, to change a copay, to change an out of pocket. Everything is a variable when you're trying to measure that actuarial value as to so essentially you apply these incremental percentages to any change they make to what the member exposure is versus the plan exposure. So that's literally step one. And if anybody wants to see it, we can take you through the entire exercise, to show you how each increment has that effect. The next thing is that we have.
Andy, can I ask a question quick on that?
Yeah.
So the baseline, before you start making changes, the baseline for the rates are the rates that we approve.
Yeah, that's
In
correct.
July. Okay,
Yes.
So that speaks, I think, Jenny, to yours and Kyle's discussion that we set that firm base rate, and then the deviations are just made based on the decisions by the group.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's-
so I
that's-
think
so
that's where, speaking to the board authorizes those base rates, and then it's up to the groups to go from there. And I think that would, from my perspective, from a policy standpoint, I think the board should just stay out of the particulars and just set that base rate, and then the groups can make the decisions.
Yeah.
Something that might give another layer of comfort in this is the idea that, it'd be similar to Blue Cross Blue Shield. If a group was wanting to mitigate their renewal costs, of course, generally Blue Cross would come out and provide a list of other plan options that they could opt for, and it could be a decreased rate. So it'd be no different in this case. It's really similar to that idea.
So just for simplicity, let's just say, all those initial rates, we needed to come up with $1 million. The final rate that you came up with based on all those changes would be the similar. I know it's not plus or minus, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you still got what you needed to get to, correct? I mean,
Yeah. So
by
in the end,
reducing the cost of their plan. Okay.
it mitigates the exposure to
Yeah.
what the plan pays. So it's a weighted incremental adjustment. When you look at, so if we were looking for let's say a 12% increase, and all those changes of those 6 groups, depending on how many lives that they had, and depending on the incremental changes they had, maybe it ends up being, 0.5 of the 12%. It becomes overall as a pool now 11.5. But ultimately the base rate stays where we started from, and then the tweaks that they do on the plan. Does that help give some context to that? The other thing on the benefit modeling that we do is that we actually can look at their claims history to say, if we make this copay or the deductible or the out-of-pocket change, we actually can model it to their plan based on their claims history. So we take the actuarial value, we take their claims, and then the other thing is that we give a very small credit to of any adjustment, and that would be what we call migration. What that happens is we know from our data that if you change an out-of-pocket, say from 2,500 to 10,000, you actually have people leave the plan, because if they have a choice, and we've seen this happen with a lot of our groups, those individuals that have the highest exposure, if they have a choice somewhere else, they actually leave or they go to Medicare. As an example, that's one of the reasons that we've talked a lot about Medicare education. But what really gets these individuals to move, in addition to the education, is you change their out-of-pocket, those people are actually going to leave and go to Medicare. Because those individuals are sometimes the highest cost claimants that are in the pool. And you know, we're trying to educate them. At the same time, we're giving them those incremental adjustments that they would, you know, that they would get to benefit from by, again, using the actuarial value, looking at the benefit modeling, and then just a very slight adjustment for any migration. So those are really the three things. And if anybody, like I said, would like to go through the exercise with us to kind of show as we look at any group going forward, we're more than, it's all transparent. You know, everything is laid out, and you can see that how it works.
Okay, thank you, Randy. So just from some of the comments in regards to the board, obviously it is our role as a board to set those base tier rates like we did in September, and then when we set them again for the schools, I think is in June. And then if there is some deviations from those base rates by the plan administration, by the entities, it's really their choice to do that. But it is nice for the board to be informed. I appreciate having the board be informed that we did have 6 of our member groups make some adjustments toward their plans to be able to reduce their exposure and premium, which also then assists the entire plan, or entire group, I should say, from additional exposure as well. So how is the board feeling? Do you feel that the board should be approving these rates as more of a formality after the adjustments are made, or more of an informational report back, knowing what different plan administrations were done as far as edits to their plans? I'm personally, when I'm listening to this, I feel like I think it's our responsibility to approve that base rate. And I like the information to the board, but I'm not sure we would necessarily need to approve those changes, but I'm very open to discussion on this.
From my perspective, Jenny, I don't think the board should, after we approve the base rate for each group, if the groups want to make changes to their plans to reduce their increases, and Brown & Brown has a process in place that deviates from that base rate that we set with actuarially credible factors that adjust those base rates, I don't think there's any need for the board to get involved beyond that, other than I agree that it's nice to know what happened, but I don't think there's a reason for us to have to approve the rate change and have the groups on the flip side agree to all these changes, but then have it in limbo that, you know, the rate changes would only happen if the board approves it. I think we set that base rate, and then with actuarially credible information, Brown & Brown can deviate from that base rate based on what the groups decide to do.
Okay, I see we have some agreement in the chat as well with that philosophy.
So we shouldn't, I mean, it would be twice a year, right? So you wouldn't want that information in like a consent agenda just to view what changes might have happened where?
Yes, Kyle, we would definitely want the information so the board is aware
Okay,
which entities made some changes after the baseline rates are set.
very good.
But from an action standpoint, Kyle, I don't think the board should take action on it, because I don't think the group should be waiting for action on it after
No,
we've approved that base
Yeah.
rate. I think it's
so
just
maybe it's
information for the board.
information.
Yep,
Okay.
correct. One other note underneath the new enrollment January group, I'm not sure if it totally fits here, but I met with the State Association of City and Health Officials today at their quarterly board meeting. So these are the health districts across the state. Some are county, some are city, some are city county. Some of them are health districts as a whole. But some of the discussion points that had come up was that they were not aware or had some challenges in justifying whether they're a political subdivision or not, to be able to explore the option of being in the NDPHIT group. And I clarified with them that they're actually created in Century Code. Health districts and health units are in Century Code, so they would be defined as a political subdivision. And as long as they have 2 or more employees in their health district or health unit, they would have an opportunity to explore looking at NDPHIT as an option for health coverage. So I just wanted to share that with the group. I know we currently have 1 health unit that is in NDPHIT. But there was some challenges when they were looking to apply on whether they qualified. But, and Kyle, from a legislative standpoint, I would appreciate your input on that, but based on the understanding of how they're written in Century Code, to me, the definition seems they are a political subdivision and would be able to qualify.
Yeah, I would think so, yes. I think somebody had asked me that a couple months ago or something, or the topic came up and I went and looked in Century Code and I thought that what you just said, I won't repeat it, what you just said would be true.
Okay. All right. So just more of an informational for the board to know in regards to health districts. I will say after the presentation today, there were a lot of questions in regards to NDPHIT and how that looks. And so I wouldn't be surprised. May not necessarily be coming in the October renewals. I did share with them our 2 pool groups of October and January. And most of them run a fiscal year or calendar year. So, but we may be finding some interest later on in 2024 in regards to health districts and health units. So we might see some activity in that area upcoming in 24. Okay, moving forward on the agenda, task force update. We were discussing the contracts at our last board meeting in regards to terms within the contracts, and then we ended up, I think, losing our quorum, and so we tabled the discussion for this meeting because I thought it was important for all board input and also to get deciding on how we want to move forward with the contracts. Currently, the contracts with Seek and with Brown and Brown are a 1-year contract with a 1-year option to renew. And just based on what Seek does for us and based on what Brown and Brown does for us, do we want to look at extending the contract term beyond a 1-year contract with an option of 1 year to renew? Just wanting some feedback from the board on that. Would we want to look at a 3-year or a 2-year with a 1 year or 2-year option to renew?
I think a 2 years is fine by me, but the 3rd year option to renew is, I think 2 years gives you a little more continuity. We're already into our 2nd, we're into our 3rd year. I came on a year late, so we're into our 2nd or 3rd year.
3rd.
Right, so we'd have 2 more would give us a total of 5. So I'm fine with it too.
And are you talking both for Brown and Brown and for Seek?
Correct.
Okay. Any other thoughts from board members on this? I just think 12 months is a pretty quick turnaround time for the magnitude of what both Seek and Brown does. So are we all comfortable with a 2-year maybe extension or a 2-year on the contract and then doing a 1-year option to renew? Was that your motion, Cole?
Well, I was going to add to that. So like we had that little subcommittee, we were trying to make sure spelling out the details between Seek and Brown, and, you know, there was whatever came from that. I don't know if we're 100% all happy with things are being followed through and being completed. And that was some of the issues in the beginning. I'm not aware of any of those concerns unless somebody is, you know, it's difficult with the third-party vendors here trying to listen to a board meeting and try to explain what that subcommittee was trying to accomplish. But my assumption is a lot of those things have been worked through. I haven't heard complaints from our, you know, constituents, meaning all of our municipalities and political subs throughout the state. So I would make a motion to approve a 2-year for both Brown and Brown and Seek with the same conditions, or how do we have to do the rates? Do we have any of that changing?
As far as the what we're paying them for contract for services?
Right. So if we're doing a 2-year contract, how does that relate with the rates? I guess is my question, because we're agreeing to proceed for 2 more years with Seek and Brown, but are there any language in that are relating to financial changes?
And maybe that's something that we should look at as a task force, maybe to review those pieces in those contracts to see what the, how the verbiage as far as rates are included in those contracts. Because
Right,
there
'cause I
could
don't
be
want-
an incremental adjustment.
Yeah, I don't wanna, so my motion would be to approve a 2-year contract with Brown and Seek contingent on review of the financials of that contract so that we're not entering into something that we aren't aware of.
This is Kevin, I second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Jenny, the only thing it's kind of speaking to Cole's comments about the task force and what we've, discovered and what's changed with Seek and kind of the overall operations. First off, I think bringing Angie on board has made a world of difference with, communication to our members and just the flow of, from my perspective, not in it day to day, but from what I've seen and not hearing any feedback from our members in the negative. It just seems like our members are communicated with, better, but then also there's kind of that flow between Brown and Brown and Seek and, really driving that process. So, kudos to Angie. And I think that's helped a lot. Now, with regard to, the contracts and whether to renew or to, extend them for 2 years with a 3rd-year option. Some of the things we talked about with the task force, I think are still things that we need to think about from a board perspective, looking at it with Seek. And there's no reason for me to doubt, anything would change, but I know Kyle at some point is going to retire. And are we concerned then as the board for NDPHIT about what, Seek's appetite would be for, continuing on with administering the NDPHIT trust and not that, Kyle or Brenna or Angie, you guys need to say anything about that right now, but I think it's something for the board to consider as we look long-term, for NDPHIT. And then also with Brown and Brown, Brown and Brown, does a great job for us right now. But are there areas where we might need to look at other options as well there? Those are, just from a board perspective, are we locking ourselves in for 2 years with a 3rd-year option on areas that we might need to explore sooner rather than later? I don't know, but just something to think about.
When you also think about how new NDPHIT is and there's so many moving parts, I think having some consistency over these first years, if you will, to be able to get things to put in place. And we have worked out some kinks. There's definitely been some bumps in the road and trying to figure out particularly the communication piece, the transparency piece. But like Brennan said, having Angie on board and having clearer communication with our members, I'm hearing better feedback from our members stating that there's definitely a clearer communication way of being able to share information with our members and the like. But from the board's perspective, maybe as a board, do you want the task force to continue to not investigate, but review those contracts, making sure that we're still on par for what our plan is moving forward, and going from there?
Jenny, let me frame it this way. Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to just go? It's not like there's a huge burden on us to look at these contracts every year for the next couple of years, at least, and maybe that because we're still new in this process, it would make some sense to evaluate this stuff on a year-to-year basis. And then, once we get more comfortable with how everything flows and we've got policies in place that we're comfortable with, because there's some things we don't know yet either. It seems like every board meeting, different things are popping up and we're asked as a board to decide, do we want this to be the policy of the board to handle this that way? And, maybe it makes some sense for us to look at administration and look at our consultant every year and just say, does this still meet the needs of NDPHIT? And again, then once we mature, it might make more sense then to enter into longer term agreements.
Yeah.
So Brennan, if I understood you correctly, are you thinking almost like, I don't want to call it a performance evaluation, but basically evaluating them annually? with feedback and direction as needed?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't say performance reviews, but I think evaluating what the needs are of NDPHIT and what is being provided by, you know, our consultant and by the administrator, and just making a determination at that point if it continues to make sense for NDPHIT. And not to say that I mean, there's nothing that I'm seeing that suggests it doesn't. But I don't know if it makes sense to lock us in long term either. And there could be something that pops up, say next year, where we're like, holy smokes, that doesn't, you know, doesn't make sense. But then all of a sudden then we're locked in for another year and a half. And I'm just concerned about, again, being so new. Are there things that we don't know yet that if we lock ourselves into a long-term deal, we're going to be kicking ourselves? And there's the risk of not having that long-term commitment. I mean, of course, Brown and Brown could come back next year and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense for Brown and Brown anymore. We're gonna move on, and then we're having to find a new consultant. So that's the other, you know, we're going to have to look at that. But from my perspective, I just think it makes a lot of sense given how new things are still and how things change. It seems at every board meeting. It makes some sense for us to have the flexibility there.
And Brenna and Kyle, can you verify, we currently are in the renewal option in our contracts, is that correct?
The contract is up December 31st and we have a 1-year renewal on it. So you're good with that 1 year till December 2024.
Okay. And that's for both Brown and Brown and Seek.
Yes.
Okay. So based on this discussion here, we do have a motion on the floor to extend the contracts for 2 years with a 1-year renewal. But based on discussion, it's sounding like we may want to go back to keeping it at an annual at this point. So I'm going to call for a vote on the motion. For those who are in support of extending the term of the contract with a 2-year with a 1-year renewal, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign.
Can you repeat what was the vote? Was it to extend for 2 years or what?
Yep, so the
lost you there.
motion, yep, so the motion that's currently on the floor was Cole's motion to extend our contract rather than it being an annual with a 1-year renewal. It is a 2-year contract with both Seek and with Brown and Brown with a 1-year renewal option based on contingent on the rate structure of those contracts. So just to clarify, that's the motion that's on the floor. So based on that motion, those that are in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, and those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it sounds like we have 2 and 2. I think there is some validity to maybe taking a step back and looking at this on an annual basis. Initially, I was thinking maybe we do extend it for 2 years with a 1-year renewal. But Brennan, you changed my mind. So if there needs to be go ahead.
This is Kevin. I think this next contract, I'm good for 2 years, but then I do agree that every year would be good.
Okay.
So we can take another vote to go 1 year, I guess. I'll make the motion for 1 year.
Okay, so we are actually amending the original motion. Is that what you're saying, Kevin?
Well, the original motion didn't pass, correct?
Well, it was 2 and 2, correct?
So it's failed, correct?
Mhm.
This is Sonia. I thought I had mute off. I'm opposed to the 2 year. I'd like to stick to the 1 year.
Okay, thank you, Sonia, because yeah, your vote did not come through, so. Okay, so
Sorry.
no, that's okay, so that motion failed. So based on that, we will keep the current contract in place where we have a 1-year contract with a 1-year renewal. And then,
Do we have to vote to renew the next year? For next year?
yes, Yep, I was just gonna say, I was gonna ask for a motion to approve renewal of a one-year contract with Seek as well as Brown and Brown. If we can combine them, if you're comfortable with that. Is there a motion?
I will make that motion.
And Steve, is there a second?
Go ahead. I'll second it. And that's just exercising our option within the current agreements for that 1-year extension. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
That was
I'll
my
make- yep.
understanding.
Yeah, I'll second.
That is,
that.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Is that Steve Holland?
Yeah, sorry, that was me.
Thank you.
All right, so all those in favor of accepting the extension on both the Seek and Brown and Brown contracts for an extension of 1 year through 2024 signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion has carried. Good discussion. Thank you all for that. So operational budget. Brenna, were you going to be reviewing this or Nora? I wasn't sure.
I can.
Okay,
Really wants to.
and that was an attachment that was sent to the board.
It was. Good lead. It's pretty straightforward. We approved a little bit higher of an operating budget last year. I believe it was 130,000. We took out a few things of entertainment and actuary work that never happened. So we now have a little bit better idea of the things that happen on an annual basis. So the legal on the different departments of how we use the lawyers to look for contracts and the trust compliance. The actuary work is for the IBNR at the end of the year. And Randy mentioned some stop loss assessments that we might need to be doing. Marketing and communication, Brown and Brown use their team for that through events and swag for the year. And then just some insurance to cover the board. And the education, we kept $10,000 in there for you guys if you want to go to training this year. That motion was made to approve you guys having that being paid for 2 years ago now. So I did.
And from a board's perspective, particularly for the new board members, this is training for specific for insurance, being on a board for insurance organizations. And so strongly encourage if your schedule allows to look at some of those dates to see if you'd be able to attend that training.
Yep, I did send that one in the email with this packet, so you can look through that if you're interested. Then the audit and the tax filing with Bailey, and we have 5,000 in there for our 2 in-person meetings, hotels and food that we have annually.
Thank you, Brenna. Does anyone have any questions for Brenna in regards to the operating budget for 2024? Okay, I would extend a motion for the approval of the operational budget.
Chris, I can make a motion.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all of those not in favor of approving the operational budget signify by saying aye. Okay, motion has carried. Okay, on to operational new officers and bylaws discussion. So Angie and Brenna were working on an email that was sent out for call of nominations. I did have a discussion both with Kevin, who has agreed to continue to be on the board. So Kevin, thank you for that. And then I also had a discussion with Lisa Gunther, who is our representative for counties. And she just said, based on her workload and where things are at right now, it would be best in her best interest to step down from the board. So we will have a vacancy to fill as far as nominations for that position. So a call to nomination email did go out, I believe, last week. And then once that is complete, I think it was December, Angie helped me out, and it was a December 10th, I think was the end date for that.
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll be voting, so there'll be a vote email that will be going out to all member groups to be able to do that election. And then those new representatives will be, their first board meeting then would be in January. One of the other things I'd like to discuss with the board is currently in our bylaws, it states that our election of officers, so chair, vice chair, is it secretary, treasurer, for the board is a one-year term. And from a chair's perspective, being here for 1 year, I feel like I'm just getting my feet wet with all of the things that you know, understanding and being able to make sure you're able to, you know, like I said, get your feet wet on being a chair and walking through the process and meeting with Brenna and Kyle and his team as far as taking care of board meetings and agenda items and the like. And so I was wanting to bring in front of the board what your thoughts are in extending the officer roles to a 2-year rather than a 1 year in those positions. Open for discussion.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm gonna make that motion.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to extend the officer terms from 1 year to 2 year. Is there any further discussion? Okay, and being no further discussion, those not in favor of approving the 2-year terms extension for officers signify by saying aye. Okay. Motion carried. Thank you all.
No, Jenny, we're gonna need to update the bylaws then.
Correct.
And so Brenna and Kyle and Angie, do you guys work with Zach on that, or how are we gonna handle that process? Just, or I'm sure you could just amend I don't know if we have a Word document for it or what, but
I
we'll have to make that.
believe I have the Word document. And I can amend it, and then do I bring it back here in January?
No, I think it's just the one spot in the bylaws, so
Yep.
just changing 1 to 2. I think we're good, but just
And
wanted to
we-
make sure we were gonna get that done.
Yep, and we just approved that change, Brenna, so we wouldn't have to bring it back to approve it again.
Okay. I promise I'll do it.
Great. Well, speaking of processes and how we do things, I think that was a great segue into the policy manual draft updates. So Kyle and Brenna, if you want to chat about that, we've made some major changes to our handbook, but I think it's for the better. So.
Yeah, so I guess I can start. So a few weeks ago, Brennan came to Fargo and we sat down and he had some amazing ideas about, the policy manual we had been putting in front of you had a lot of repetitive language from the bylaws and the trust agreement. And we all came to the consensus after he was the smart one that figured it out that we don't need to say everything 3 times. So, we reduced this version of the board policy manual to just the things that needed to be still written down. We have a few things that we need to be able to check a box off on our 990s, such like the whistleblower policy. I think there's sexual harassment and maybe one other one that's needed. So those are in there, and just a few other things. Hopefully you had time to look through it. So we'd like to have this version be able to be passed today.
Did any board members have any questions or concerns in regards to the changes that were made to the handbook? Okay, great. So if I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the policies as presented. Would anybody be willing to make a motion to accept the policies as presented?
Kevin, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
I will second.
Was that Steve?
Yes, Steve Holland.
Okay, thank you, Steve. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the policies?
One thing, Jenny, I do want to point out, so there are some policies within the policy manual that are being approved today. So we're basically there were some things that we've talked about in the past that we included in the policy manual, but then there are some things in there that maybe have been brought up in discussion in the past that we just threw into the manual saying, okay, now when we reference this moving forward, we'll say that those policies were approved when we adopted this manual as written. And it's important to note that because in our experience at the reserve fund with the insurance department is they aren't afraid to dig into the detail on that stuff and go in and say, okay, well, you have a policy about authorization for travel reimbursement. We see you've got that policy. We want to go back into the meeting minutes and figure out where the board authorized that policy. And it sounds ridiculous, but that's stuff that happens. We actually, in our most recent insurance department examination, they asked to see minutes from 1988. And so it's important to reference in the policy manual when those policies that we've got in there, when they're approved, and we'll have to reflect that in the minutes that the board adopted, what policies they did for today's meeting. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that's what we were approving along with the manual itself.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Brennan. So in the minutes, we definitely want to make sure that we have it specific stating that with this approval, it's the new membership, the expense reimbursement procedure, board reimbursements and investments. I think it's that last section, if I'm not mistaken, Brennan or Brenna, if you can just verify or validate that. It was the last 2 pages, I think, of changes or additions to the policies. Is that correct?
Yeah, whatever would be indicated by, we've got source in bold at the end of some of those paragraphs. When it says 12/6/23, those are the policies that we're approving today.
Okay. So Brenna, can you just make sure to clarify that in the minutes, the specific policies that we are approving, although we are approving the entire handbook, but just to make sure that those are specifically outlined in the minutes.
I will.
Great. So I shouldn't say we have them approved. We actually need to vote yet to approve, as that was discussion. So all of those who are not in favor of approving the policies as presented, please signify by saying aye. Okay, motion is carried. Thank you, Brenna, Kyle, Brennan, to put all of those things together, because that's sometimes we get to see it as the finished product and we get to look at it, and in 5 minutes we're approving some great work that was done, but I know that there's a lot that goes into that, into revising it and researching it, making sure that it makes sense to us as a board. So appreciate your efforts in getting that done. Okay, moving on with the NDPHIT wellness update on wellness with Thriver. Mike Ryer, I believe you are on to do a presentation to the board.
I am. Can you guys hear me okay? Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite. I've been working with you guys for a long time, and this is actually the first time I've got to meet some of you. So greatly appreciate the invite. We're going to do a quick presentation. We've had actually a fantastic year from a wellness program perspective. As you'll see, we literally more than doubled our participation. We've added some great programs that really seem to be gaining significant momentum. Working with Angie has been fantastic. She's my favorite client. So we've had a lot of fun with it too. So, all right, let me see if I can get this share screen thing here to work. So I'm gonna keep this fairly high level because I think you guys for the most part are familiar with most of what we do and how the program works, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of some of the initiatives we've got coming up. All right, so you should be seeing my screen. Is that accurate here?
Yes.
All right, and I just rotated to a new slide. Looks like you're seeing that as well. Things are rolling. So our program, or at least as it sits today, we were probably one of the first vendors I think you guys brought in. So early on, we were kind of, if stuff needed done, we helped do it. So we still help Angie with the website. We help manage some of the communications technology, the CRM. We work with Angie to develop communications. We actually had a really big initiative this year to try to streamline communications because we were getting feedback that we were over communicating, and I heard that comment earlier on in the meeting. That is a delicate balance, I'll tell you. Just you don't want to communicate too much because you can really frustrate people, but you have to communicate adequately. So we're still feeling our way through that. But one of our big initiatives for next year is also trying to coordinate all the vendors' communications, because sometimes it can be a free for all, and we're going to try to limit that a little bit. With that being said, we're also making some changes to the website. We're adding some new wellness program components as well. So as it sits, our program is driven around what we call a functional medicine approach. And what that means is it's really designed to be a collaborative, personalized approach to care, where we're really trying to identify root causes. There's a trend in what I'll call traditional medicine, just to prescribe a drug to try to mirror a symptom. We don't believe in that at all. So we want to try to work with individuals where they are, what they're ready to change. And honestly, our program is not one size fits all. It is customized to meet the needs of the patient or the member. To do that, we work with a variety of different providers, but our main focus is working with registered dietitians who have functional training. This year we added a online cooking program, which has just really blown up and taken off. We're going to add an individual cooking school capability where a member and or their family can cook with one of our chefs that are also trained as dietitians, which is going to be a really fun addition. We're starting to see a lot of people pair up to do special recipes and things like that. So it's really fun. And you may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with prevention? It's all about us trying to get people engaged in their care. And what we found, your population is very difficult to engage. People in some cases just don't care about their health. And so we're trying to make connections to get them pulled into the program any way we can. So we've continued our monthly webinars and our champion program. And then next year, as you guys are all aware, we're going to be help supporting the screening initiative. So we're looking forward to that as well. That started here last year. It's gone fairly well. We had some kinks we're working through. We are still working through. I think we've got a lot of those resolved, but definitely some shifts coming here for 2024. I do have Ashley Oswald on the phone with me, and she leads our clinical team, at least from the registered dietitian perspective. We do also have providers that are available, nurse practitioners, physicians assistants, and both life coaches and health coaches. But the entire program is funneled through the functionally trained registered dietitians. Ashley, anything you want to add to that?
If anybody has questions about the functional nutrition approach, I'd be happy to answer them. But I think you covered it pretty well, Mike. We are trained in being able to review lab results. We're experts in supplementation. So if people are coming in on supplements, we can review, advise them well. Also, if somebody's struggling, they come in, they want to lose weight. There are supplements that have been shown to be as effective as certain medications. So we're trained in being able to understand that, and we can support people. Like, for example, berberine has research to be as effective as metformin. And so that can really help keep costs down for people, right? And support them in achieving their health goals.
Thanks, Ash. So the programs you can be thinking of them either as lifestyle driven to achieve certain goals. It's not just focused on weight loss. We'll have people that are coming in that they're trying to improve focus, trying to improve their energy, reduction in anxiety, reduction in stress. So it really is holistic from that perspective. But then also, once people get in the program, we've got a process where we're trying to understand certain symptomology. What are they experiencing? And from there, Ashley and her team are able to start to solve some specific health conditions or medical need driven problems as well. So it is really a very holistic program that meets a lot of different criteria and member need. The program, because of the nature of it, we focus on utilizing a tool called an MSQ, which is the Medical Symptom Questionnaire. And Ashley, why don't you walk everybody through what this is and how you guys use it as a tool?
Yeah, so since the body as a whole, right, everything's connected. So it doesn't work so well with the functional approach to just track weight outcomes or certain labs. So we find this to be the best method to really be able to track improvement in overall health. So you can see at the top, there's a point scale, 0 to 4. 0, almost never have the symptom, up to 4, frequently have it, effect is severe. And then we have all these different categories for their different, you can say, parts of the body: brain health, digestive tract, eyes, ears, nose. And so based upon the forms that we have on our intake form for new clients, they're filling out this MSQ, and then we're tracking it as we work with them. So I consolidated all the data, the average follow-up. So the clinician might still be working with that client to get the MSQ even further down. But the improvement average overall being 51%, I think, is pretty significant when you think about how that could really be improving a client's day-to-day life. And I'll add one more piece where there's a survey in 2022 showing that 40% of people have gut issues that affect their day-to-day life. And so sometimes people will come to us like wanting weight loss or having certain goals. And upon working with them and asking questions, other things that can surface that our team can help with. And it's really this functional holistic approach is what that is.
Anybody have any questions on that piece to the puzzle?
Yeah, and I can share another story where, maybe somebody's coming into us with gut health issues. And we've had a couple of clients where we then realize and learn that they've been having migraines their entire life. So entire life migraines, they've been to different specialists and providers. And because we take this different approach and we're specialized in nutrition, we have on average 7 years of formal schooling in nutrition science, whereas physicians on average have 20 years of schooling. So there's a lot of these gaps, and we can see, they might have a magnesium deficiency based upon these symptoms. And I've had a client get rid of lifelong migraines by just replacing their magnesium stores that was totally missed. So that's kind of like the exciting thing about our program that we're implementing and working to grow here with your groups.
Absolutely. And, we do work with primary care physicians as well. So we do on occasion get access to traditional biometric data. With the enhanced screenings that we're going to be doing in 2024, we're actually going to have even more data to work with. But in general, the MSQ does tend to equate to some extent to traditional biometric markers. So it's for a functional program, we feel it's probably one of the better tools out there, but it does equate to what most would consider more traditional biometric markers as well. So anecdotally, and it's tough to report anecdotally, but we hear a lot of very positive comments from members in terms of the program just making dramatic changes in their lives. Because it's very rare. If you think about healthcare today, it's very rare to be able to create a personal relationship with a care provider and a care team. And that's really where this program shines, and having that unlimited visits, come as much as you want, work on specific things, work at your own pace. And just the approach that our providers take with allowing people to participate in their care. It's not one where a care provider is dictating and stating this is what you must do, and I'm the white coat, I'm the expert. It's a really collaborative care process that is really done well with this group. It's been interesting to see how it's evolved, just because we were there from day one, and just the skepticism that a lot of the members had around healthcare in general. It's been really fun to see it evolve over the years to where they're now truly participating, they're engaging, they're enjoying it. I mentioned the cooking school. I hope if you guys haven't attended one, please do. They're a blast, and the attendance on those is going up exponentially every single one. So we have 2 RDs right now, registered dietitians, that are also classically trained as chefs as well. So that's made it a lot of fun, and a lot of the things they've been creating have been fantastic. But more importantly, it's been a fantastic feeder into the wellness program. So the people that are attending the school are then setting up personal one-on-one appointments. So it's really served a great function of getting more people into the program. And we talk about this all the time with Angie. It's if we can get them there once, they're going to stay. It's all about how do we get them there one time. So over the years, we've tried a variety of different things, and this has by far been one of the more effective things that we've done. People love it for the most part, right? Right, Ash, anything you want to add to it?
No, it's exciting. I'm glad the snowball is starting to roll with it.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So we still do our monthly webinars. We do general webinars and champion program. The champion program is continued. That was something we started, I believe, 2 years ago. The goal of the champion program has been one where we have additional stakeholders within each employer. The goal there is so that we don't necessarily have to, if we need help with getting communications out in the employer setting, we go to our champions in addition to or instead of the primary stakeholders, just because we recognize how busy everybody is, and sometimes they don't have time to promote some of the programs. So the champion program has been effective and did actually grow quite a bit last year. The webinars have been well received. We've really mixed up the topics on that and had some guest speakers and everything else. In terms of our engagement level in 2023, it was a pretty dramatic increase. We had a total of 528 visits so far. We're still seeing folks these last few weeks, but that is a 120% increase over last year. The engagement rate is really high as well. So as I mentioned, once they come in, they tend to stick. They also re-engage when they need to. So we've been really pleased with the way the year has gone. I would say we're even more excited about what we're doing next year. So the population, as everyone knows, is difficult to engage. So we're going to be supporting the screening program. And this is something that I've done in the past. If you can't get people to go to healthcare, you bring the healthcare to them. That's the theory behind the screenings, and I look at it truly as a marketing and engagement tool of just getting people in the program. We had 79 visits, I believe, so far. We've still got another couple groups that we're squeezing in here in the end of the year. We are going to be utilizing a body mass tracker called eVolt. I think everybody's familiar with that, and that's a real non-invasive, very simple way to get data points that the providers can start to work with in terms of the one-on-one meetings. We are also starting a referral program. So those that we do see that are considerably more at risk, we're going to be integrating into the Digby program, providing referrals out to them. We're also referring to one of our internal providers as well. And if we're seeing some issues around pharmaceutical needs and such. So that will be in addition to the program this year. And one of the things that we've talked about, and we're hoping to engage. Go ahead. Was there a question? Sorry. thought I heard a rumbling there. We want to try to engage in a more personalized manner as well. So that's some of the communication strategies that we're hoping to develop, where a communication could go out, specifically to individuals that we know are have potential risk for hypertension, as an example. So just utilizing the different data sets that we have access to try to create more personalized communications also.
Hey, Mike, this is Jenny. Just a quick question. When
Jenny.
you were talking about improving preventative disease tracking via use of provider referral programs, are you talking about our clientele coming, like our members going to a medical provider and they're seeing that they're in higher risk areas? Is that where you were referring to Digby about bringing them in and doing some preventative health?
Yeah,
Okay.
as I understand it, Digby is going to be rolling out a new program in March. I know that's still kind of a work in progress, and they'll, I believe, be presenting next. But
yes,
we do want to increase primary care participation without question. You have a lot of members that need more interaction with primary care. So yes, we'd like to integrate back to local health community wherever possible, but in lieu of that, if they don't have access to primary care, which is what we are seeing, we have the ability for them to establish a virtual primary care relationship if that's the last resort. So that's something else we're looking at for this year.
okay, thank you.
And I think that's pretty much it from a high level. Did anybody have any questions or anything that myself or Ashley could answer for you?
No questions from me at least, but I will like to just share some comments. I've taken part in the online cooking school and champion meetings, and I will say from when they began to where we're at now, it's definitely gaining momentum. And I think sometimes word of mouth is your best marketing tool. And so I think as we continue to have additional participation from members, I'm hoping that those will continue to grow. I think they've been a real positive impact. It's easy stuff that really anybody can take part in and even do from the things that they're teaching in the classes. And I think it's been a positive step forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from board members in regards to Thriver and what they're doing with programs for our group? All right, well, Mike, thanks for joining us today and being able to give us an overview of what's going on with Thrivent, and look forward to the new things to come in 24. I know, like you said, you've been doing some on-site screenings with a few of our members, but I think that's really going to be kickstarting in 2024. So hopefully that will give us some more momentum to continue to move forward in that preventative health arena.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and so segueing into from Thriver going into population health, Alec Thompson, I believe you're on as well to talk about Digby and where we're at with the proposal.
Yep, thank you. Let me share my screen. Hi everyone. First off, good to see everyone again. I know we talked about this last month or the month before in regards to kind of the overview of the Digby program and really how to control the spend around the GLP-1 drugs, especially around weight management, where we saw over 1,000% increase last year, and make sure that people that need the drugs are getting on the drugs, make sure we're being responsible and not putting people on the drugs that don't need them, just because it's kind of become the new fad. So a lot of similarities between the methodology between Thriver and Digby and Brown & Brown. But we've worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota and Prime over the last month and a half, 2 months to kind of figure out what this process will look like in regards to working with them. So that's what I'll walk through today. In regards to kind of an overview of the process and what it will look like, what the plan is, and obviously with your approval, the plan is to turn off GLP-1 coverage for weight management come January 1st. So it'll no longer be a covered drug through Blue Cross Blue Shield and Prime, and then, or at least give communications January 1st, I'm sorry, because you need not 60 days notice. And then when that turns off March 1st, Digby will roll out and take over all GLP-1 prescriptions. Will now go through the Digby program instead of through Blue Cross Blue Shield. With that, obviously comes a mess of communications. So we've kind of made sure that all the bases are coverage where Thriver will be involved with it. They'll have all the information around the Digby program and how people can get a GLP-1 drug if they're looking for it, as well as Blue Cross Blue Shield and Prime. They will also have call centers that will have all the information on Digby. So if someone were to call, they can talk to it and steer them to us. And then as well as us, we'll spend most of our time targeting the people that are currently on GLP-1 drugs today, so that they're aware of the transition come March 1st, so that there's no lapse in their coverage of the drug for that time being. So once the communication is sent out to the population, GLP-1 coverage for weight management is turned off. March 1st, Digby rolls out. That's communicated to the population. Then the route of care for the members to get on a GLP-1 drug, if they're looking to, will be through the Digby program. And when they come through the Digby program, we will determine what is the best route of care for them. And I'll walk through that in a second. And then they'll really have two options to actually get the drug themselves. One will be through the near site clinic that you guys have. And that will be at a zero copay for members that have the PPO plan through you, or a $25 copay for people in the high deductible plan. Or if they would like to go through Blue Cross Blue Shield and their physician or their PCP, they still have that option. But it will be at the traditional cost sharing that they're sitting at today, which is somewhere around 30%. So a cheaper option for the member and also for the trust to go through the near site clinic. And that's really where we will start most of the care.
Hey, Alec, just for clarification, just so everybody knows what we're into on the near site, we talked over the last couple of board meetings that we can get the GLP-1s through compound pharmacy, and there's currently a contract that's in place with the Medalis Clinic. That is called the near site clinic. That's who Jamestown uses, as well as West Fargo is expanding one in Fargo, but it's telehealth based and through compound pharmacy. And as we shared, just as a reminder, the cost difference, theirs is $300 a script versus almost $1,100 a script. Through Prime and Blue Cross is about $1,100, and through the compound pharmacy, it's $300. So that's what Alex is referring to, is those are the choice options that people will have that they can look at.
So just a question, I just want to make sure. So when you say that, I mean, how about if I'm in Rugby and I need to get this, do I got to go to West Fargo? Can I go to White Drug? Can I go to my hospital pharmacy?
Yeah, it's all mail order, basically.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, mail order service is what they'll do. So telehealth for the consultation, and then it'll be FedExed overnighted to them, or through mail order, essentially, as to how they get it. Go ahead, Alec. Sorry.
No, thank you. So that's kind of an overview of what it'll look like process wise. For the member, what it'll look like is obviously they'll come to Digby through communications that we talked about. They'll get on the Digby program, they'll connect with the coach, they'll explain to them what the journey will look like and ship their at-home tests. So every member will get an at-home genetics test, gut microbiome test, and a glucose monitor. And that allows us to really have inputs in understanding their health. We'll also look at their past pharmaceutical use through the claims data that we have, as well as their current BMI, and really evaluate, obviously, where does the member sit today? What's the biological root causes behind their condition? And what is the best route of care for each individual? So at that point, they'll go through the stratification model that we have, and each member will be bucketed into one of the three care categories. So can they get to their an optimal BMI with just working with Digby Health, just working with food as medicine based on their biology and a personalized care plan? Or do they need Digby plus a low-cost drug such as a metformin to get to their BMI? Or do they actually need a GLP-1 drug to get to their optimal BMI? And we will then communicate which route of care the member fits into, and obviously be completely transparent with them in regards to what the care route's going to look like going forward for them. So we'll communicate with the member. We will also communicate with the near site clinic and in regards to if they are approved for a GLP-1 drug or not. And then as well, if they've decided to go to their local physician and go the traditional route through Blue Cross Blue Shield, we will also notify their physician and Blue Cross Blue Shield that they are eligible for coverage for the GLP-1 drug. So they will still have the traditional route that they can go down today. They just have to go through the Digby program and get approval for the drug first before they can go down that route, so that we're making sure that we're getting the right people on the drug and keeping the wrong people off of it. So from there, communications go out. We'll help set up those appointments with the near site clinic or the physician, depending on which route they're going. And then the physician can also do their evaluation, which they're going to want to do clinically, prescribe the drug, and they will continue to work with the member in regards to on a basis of monitoring the GLP-1 drug. With that, Digby will work in conjunction for all members that are on the GLP-1, as well as the members that are not recommended that care route, to really address the root cause and start to get them healthy on a biological level. Also remote monitoring for GLP-1 symptoms, as well as any other symptoms, and managing side effects that sit across malnutrition, GI conditions, muscle loss is a huge issue with members that are dealing with these GLP-1 drugs, that we're seeing a lot of people get off the drug because of those side effects. So we've been able to effectively control those to make sure that the members that are getting on these drugs are having the best care path that they can possibly have.
Alec, a quick question for you in regards to when you were talking about members who, let's say, qualify for the GLP-1 drug. Were you stating that they will have an option to use either the near site clinic to receive the drug, or through, when you said traditional means? So are we stating, like, through the one clinic, it's a $300 cost to the plan, and the alternate option is an $1,100 cost to the plan? So are you saying that the member can choose which way that they want to receive the drug? Or maybe I misunderstood.
Correct. Yeah. So yes, they will have the option at the end of the day. Obviously, they can't get the drug if they just go to their physician and never go through Digby. They have to get approved through the Digby program to be eligible for the GLP-1, either route. Now, once they're approved for the GLP-1 drug, then we are going to tell them about the option they have at the near site clinic, because it's also cheaper for them, right? It's no copay to them versus paying a 30% or so copay if they go to their physician. But if they did want to get it through their primary care physician and go through the traditional route, they would have that option.
Yeah, I guess that's the big point, Jenny, is that it's really to look at it to say there is a member cost share based on their plan design. They would have to pay if they do the traditional, whereas there's you minimize the barrier to consider the other option at a much lower cost basis to the plan.
I think that's going to be a real key communication point, to make sure that they understand the major price difference in those two options.
Absolutely.
And I know you know that, but I'm just verifying or validating that that's going to be a real key piece to this program.
Absolutely. And we'll work with, sorry, Randy, but we will work with Angie and Driver and Brown and everyone on the communications. But the plan is to steer the population through the near site clinics for that cost reason, but have the traditional route if they want to go to their PCP and go through Blue Cross Blue Shield as almost a backup plan if they really want to push that.
And again, it's really specific just to this GLP-1 drug. So it's not like we're saying you can never use your local pharmacy for any of your pharmaceutical needs. It's just really specific to this higher end medication, correct?
And for weight loss too. So that's the other thing too. So yes, those two things, Jenny, that's correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alex, sorry.
Yeah, that's really it for me. I mean, I have a slide with other questions that I came up on the last call, just to kind of reiterate them of what happens if they want to go to the physician instead of their near site, which we just talked about. They'll be approved through Digby with our file feed with Blue Cross Blue Shield North Dakota, and they can go that route, even though we will make sure that it's communicated that they have a cheaper option at the near site. If they were to go to a near site or the physician to get on a GLP-1 and not come to Digby, that's why we make sure that everybody is aware of Digby, and they will have be able to communicate with the member that they have to go through the Digby program to get on a GLP-1 drug for weight loss. And all members that are on GLP-1 drugs today will be automatically approved for the GLP-1 drug through the stratification model. In the instances, we do not want to take someone abruptly off of a drug. So we don't believe they should be on a GLP-1 drug. That'll be more of a longer term tapering process, but we're not going to just lapse anyone's coverage at the beginning of the program come March 1st. And then members will continue to work with Digby on a lifestyle purpose throughout their time on the GLP-1 drugs, so we can make sure we're addressing the root cause and we can get to a point where we can get them off the drug. And if we don't see the instance of a member getting off a GLP-1 drug and immediately seeing weight regain because they didn't change any of the root causes or the biological problems or the lifestyle issues. So we'll work in conjunction with the GLP-1 drug to make sure that we're addressing all bases and really putting in a holistic solution around them.
And just one other update on all this, just so you're aware, is that we just did an updated analysis on our forecast spend. If you remember the last time we were forecasted about 1.7 million spend this year, it's actually 2.4 million is what we're looking at, of which about 35% of them are it's by pool, which is kind of interesting too, just so you're aware. In the October pool, which is the school districts, about 35% of these individuals on the GLP-1 are weight loss related. For the January pool, it's about 15% of those individuals are weight loss related, which means there's a much higher concentration on the January pool that are diabetic versus those in the school district. So you just so you keep that context. So the reality of it is, at this point, because Blue Cross is not willing to relinquish the control over the diabetic pre-auth, we're looking at, again, 35% of those individuals of the October pool and about 15% of the January pool that this is really targeted as the rollout. But it's still an escalating spend. The other thing we discovered is that although Blue Cross has denied that they're giving access to anybody who's who's not a diabetic, the reality is that we're seeing the data is still there. Individuals are getting like Ozempic that literally for weight loss. So if we get this communicated right and it's described how it works, the idea is to get that to tackle this enormous spend. It's representing almost 5% of the spend. And so, if you look at just the increase, and if we say, hey, we had a 11 or 12% increase, and you say 5% of it's related to this, that's why this is such an important thing. And Kyle and I were talking about this earlier today, and that some employers, around the country and some plans are just not even covering it any further for weight loss related. But 94% of employers, based on the last survey done by a national organization, require a pre-auth and management process for lifestyle and behavior, which is exactly what's being discussed with Digby. So anyway, just to give you a little bit more context on this.
So Randy, why is Blue Cross Blue Shield giving pushback, I guess, from those clients that we could be helping?
Yes, it has to do with the rebate. In fact, they sent an email and I forwarded it to Alec, and the first thing we said is they care about the money because they're making money on the rebate. And that email that they sent last week clearly, and I brought it up to my meeting with Blue Cross this morning. I said, you're conflicted. We're trying to manage this process, but you're looking at it, and Prime's looking at it about how much money are you losing? Because every incremental person we take off the drug, or we manage the process of it, or we even divert to using the compound pharmacy, they lose the revenue.
So what is the mission of the health insurance companies? Is it about the bottom line, or is it about long-term better health for your members? Sorry, facetious and a rhetorical question, but interesting to, maybe they need to be reminded as to why they are providing these types of things.
And it's totally frustrating because they know it's a big issue, but they also know the revenue that's involved. So it depends on the audience that they're speaking to and whether they're in the public or behind closed doors. So that's just my opinion.
Well, Alec, thank you for joining us today and giving us an update on Digby and where that's at. It would be interesting to see maybe in February, another kind of check-in to see how things are going, particularly with that January transition, with people getting informed that there will be some changes. It does sound like this could be quite a big game changer for those who are using it for weight loss. It'd be interesting to just get a quick update again, February or March, I'm not sure, wherever you guys maybe feel would be appropriate to provide another update to the board. Because I do think this is a big it is a big challenge and also moving forward a game changer for our group. So again, thank you for coming in to present. Does any of the board members have any questions for Alec in regards to the Digby program?
Just one other thing I was going to mention, Jenny, is that they did give us the requests that were made by the attorney on the contract that they sent over to Digby were adjusted by Digby based on the feedback that came back on what our attorneys, or I should say the trust attorney, has recommended. They did make those adjustments on the contract, just so you know that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, we're going to move into the Blue Cross Blue Shield discussion. And Randy, I know you're going to touch on the stop loss premiums. And just as a reminder to the board, last board meeting, we had approved a stop loss increase from 175,000 to 300,000. And I think, Randy, you're going to kind of share what that looks like from our perspective in savings and refund incentives. So I will let you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Let's see if I can get it to
It's
work.
not in presentation mode, but there it is. There you go.
Okay. There, thanks. So this was an update, just so you know, on those screenings that Mike was referring to. There was actually 213 individuals that went through it, and these are the entities that went through so far. And, you know, Mike and his team and Synergy have been working, you know, really hard to coordinate this process and to give the best experience to these groups that have participated. But on the stop loss, just this is a recap. We showed this the last time, but it's gives you the kind of the detail of what this and the purpose of the refund program is designed to do. First of all, as we talked earlier in that prior meeting, is that we gave over the probably a 5 or 6 month period, we gave language to what the program can be structured for. And they did the filing, that being Blue Cross Blue Shield, to the Department of Insurance, and it was approved which is approved based on a refund program for stop loss purposes. And in this case, the reconciliation, if it's adopted, we did this for the October pool, and this is being proposed for the January pool. It's the same exact terms. It's basically says, you know, here's the rate, here's the options for different stop loss levels. And the reconciliation happens 9 months after the term of the contract, and it's a 1-year term. And then 9 months later, we do the reconciliation. And as we shared before, we do receive essentially an administrative fee for managing this with essentially for the trust and Blue Cross as part of this program. And that's what it is. It's $1.86 per employee per month is what is paid to us for doing that. And we set forth criteria of what we are trying to advocate as part of the groups to participate. One is getting the Medicare Education Program, the MCG, which we've shared, and the trust is doing. Getting employers in the trust to actually move their out-of-pocket as the plan design strategies. We'd like everybody to be at a minimum of $5,000 and $10,000, out of pocket, but that's not required. It's just we're trying to educate the employers into the value of trust members to consider that out-of-pocket change because of our risk pool management strategy, and it does affect any of that migration I talked about earlier. If you have 1 or 2 people of your highest cost claimants, it has a huge impact on minimizing stop loss claims. That's another strategy for why we're doing this program as well. And then also we're adopting the pharmacy programs. In this case, Blue Cross has the Accredo and the Flex program that's been adopted by the trust and being implemented as of January. And then every year we can look at it. Do we benefit from it? Did we win on it? Or are we trending in such a fashion that, the refund isn't going to work in our favor anymore? So every year we relook at this at the end of the reconciliation and also their premium forecast they give us on the renewals. And this is the methodology in detail, but basically we set the threshold at a 75% loss ratio. Anything below a 75% loss ratio, up to 20% of the premium can be refunded back to the trust. That is the methodology. And so that's why we do that reconciliation, because we evaluate the stop loss of the loss ratio and then determine the percentage that is shared back to the trust up to that 20%. These are the options that we received, and it's a busy slide, I apologize, but this is literally what we look at. We look at each level based on moving from the 175 up to the $300,000 stop loss. And if you'll remember, this was also one of the studies we did 2 years ago with the actuary, is to say, should we take on more risk? And it was the recommendation we should look at taking on more risk if it worked out into basically when you move the stop loss level up, in this case from 175 to 300,000, you have to measure the number of claimants that you're going to get in that delta, as well as the dollar value in an averaging. So we have what's called a high case analysis tool that we take through and look at the prior 3 years to predict the number of claimants and the average cost per claimant by going from 175 to $300,000. And that's what this modeling did. We took literally each one of these and did an iteration on it to study it. And so when it got down to, the other thing we looked at is what's been the historical loss ratio. So if you look at the bottom left, you'll see that the first year was a 34.4%, but that was an immature year. The last 2 years between 62.6 and 64.6 loss ratio, and then the averaging time period has been about a 55% loss ratio. So we're it's going to trend more into that, I would say, the 60 to 65% loss ratio. But still, if that's the case, we have an opportunity to recover up to anywhere from 10 to 15% of the premium based on the way the model is structured. So we looked at these various options, and the one that we identified is the most optimal one is actually the 300,000, which is the same one we did for the October pool. There's about a $1.2 million savings, but then we have a funding liability to cover for those claims, which will be on this next page here, but it's, going back, sorry. It is $834,000 of claim liability. So you have to take that savings we're going to get subtracted out of what we expect on the claims of $834,000. The net is $406,000 of savings by going from the current 175 to the $300,000 stop loss, and funding that liability that's required between the 175 and the 300. So similar to the October pool, our recommendation is to go with the 300,000 and for the opportunity to get the savings at the $406,000. Just as a reminder, for the October pool, when we did this, it was about a $308,000 savings for the October pool. And so the January pool is actually a little bit more. So here's it is in summary. So this is, again, how the modeling works up to the 75% loss ratio and what the history has been on the last 3 years, and the projected refund. And essentially what the savings is and that funding liability, when you subtract it out, it comes out to the 406,000. Are there any questions? I know it was a lot of information, but since we've been through it the first time, hopefully it's a kind of a recap and a reminder of how it works and the structure of it.
All right, Randy. So I wasn't at the last board meeting, so I'm trying to get the dummy version here. The difference between the difference between the 175 and a $300,000 stop loss premium, that stop loss is per individual plan.
Per individual, correct.
And so by increasing it to an overall loss premium of $300,000, we saved 400 grand instead of 175 stop loss.
Well, 175 is just that's the threshold of where, when the insurance of Blue Cross right now will pay, they pay in every claimant that has a claim. Let's say it's $500,000 claim. Anything that hits that, beyond the 175, it pays up. Anything beyond that, they cover all the risk. What we're saying is we're going to raise that threshold instead of 175 we're going to raise it to 300,000. So what that does, Cole, is it lowers our fixed cost because our premium goes down with the higher that we raise that stop loss. So the trust saves $1.2 million of fixed cost, but you also have an exposure of liability now between the 175 and the 300 you have to account for.
So basically, it's like your car. You have a higher deductibles with basically for the
That's
plan.
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You're taking a higher deductible, and in this case, we have to measure that exposure of claimants that by taking that higher risk of the deductible.
And so as long as we have a fund balance that is covering that gap, I mean, right?
Yeah. So part of that fund balance increase now is $1.2 million that they've been keeping that now goes completely to the trust.
And then the cost of claims, Randy, to just drive it home, if you will, we're having an exposure of about 800,000 between those two. But when you look at the savings that we're receiving by increasing that
Deductible.
that threshold, we're still $400,000 ahead,
That's correct.
if you will. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And
this
so,
is,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's the reason the actuary was suggesting that we should look at consider different thresholds, because as you get larger, your statistical prediction becomes better, and statistics is also going to be more predictable in the number of individuals that are actually going to be in those different thresholds of risk.
And if we approve this, is this an annual thing where we can review it again next year? And if we feel this was the wrong decision, we can always go back?
That's correct.
Okay. And we did approve the increase for the schools from 175 to 300 based on the actuarial information because it was a cost savings to them around 300,000, if my memory serves me right.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay.
So Jenny, that was my question. That was my question, Jenny. So thank you for asking that. And then my follow-up would be, so when we get through this first year and we see rate potential increases, how does this help lower those rate increases on the back end to our members?
Well, again, if you take that 400,000 example, and that offsets any potential exposure of increases that you could have in your aggregate claims. So that's a windfall back to the trust in ultimately saving money.
Which thereby could potentially reduce the increases or hold steady the premiums.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
you're trying to, anytime we can pay less fixed cost and manage the risk exposure, you're either holding the cost steady or you're reducing the increase.
Well, and taking it another step further, when we're doing the proactive management of the GPL1 drugs, and if that ends up being a positive effect, which I would assume it will be, that will also, I would assume, affect the claims costs, which therein would still maybe be adding more to the bottom line in regards to where we're at in the plan.
That's correct. Yeah,
okay.
Because if you remember, the Dignity proposal is that they're going to put themselves at 100% risk, whatever they charge, reflective, commensurate with whatever to the savings. So they're totally incentivized to reduce the cost of that GLP-1 cost. So whatever that windfall is or that savings, again, that goes back to the plan too.
Right. Does anybody else have any other questions in regards to making a change to the stop loss from 175 to 300? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to increase our stop loss threshold from 175 to 300,000 in the upcoming plan year. Are we not, is there anyone that would be willing to do a motion on that?
Yeah, I already come here.
I'm sorry, who made the motion? I didn't hear.
I was just saying, I think the motion needs to say move up to 300,000 and join the refund program as well, right, Randy?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's two things we have to motion for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move to 300 and participate in the refund program.
And this is similar to what we did for the schools in October.
It's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
I'll make the
So
motion,
we
Kevin.
did this in September though, right?
For the schools, but we haven't done this for the groups, for the January groups,
Oh,
Brennan. Yep.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Yep. I'll move that.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Kevin.
Thanks, Cole. Motion is second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of not approving the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye. Okay, motion carried. Randy, I'm going to let you continue on with the Blue Cross Blue Shield platform, the administrative structure changes that are going to be happening coming, I believe, January of 25.
Yeah. So I'll go back to my, let's see, right here. Sorry. To the right one here. Go back here. Yeah, those are the, can you see that? So here's just a couple administrative things on Blue Cross. One is they historically they have been supporting that being their vendor they use. Let me clarify that. They have a vendor that manages their technology for their claims administration platform. And they have historically been supporting the plans that Blue Cross has always had on their program, but essentially they have notified Blue Cross, I guess about actually almost a year ago, that some of these older plans are not going to be supported without an in and out of network benefit. What does that really mean? It means that there's a PPO network that Blue Cross has that's pretty much every provider in the state. And then you have out of network, which means essentially if you're not in the network, then you have a different cost share. So as long as I stay in my network, then I'm covered under the benefits that are put forth by my employer. But if I choose a provider who's not in the network, I may have, instead of a $500 deductible, it's a $1,000 deductible. And that's effectively what Blue Cross has moved their entire administrative platform to. They gave us notice that they were almost requiring us to move all the groups to them as of January. Well, we said that's just not going to happen. And secondly, we have to give a notice by law to any time you make a plan change. And so we negotiated basically to say everybody is going to stay on exactly what they have now. And then we would, in October, for the October pool and for the January pool, we need to get a disruption analysis, which means it says, hey, if there's a chiropractor that's not in the network that accepted your PPO fee schedule, we need to know that. And each group has to, to know that that's no longer supported by Blue Cross as an in-network provider. When they ran their first analysis or iteration on it, whether they're in the network or out of the network, fortunately, almost all the providers are in the network, but it could be just the one provider that is on one program. It still has to be communicated way in advance, even though, so if they're not supporting it, the employer needs to know. So that is something that will be rolling out in the next few months for us to do the disruption analysis. And then if we identify any group that could be affected as of October, as of January of next year, then we have to have an individual conversation with each group to let them know that the entire Blue Cross system is on this process now for their platform support. So we felt it was important that we bring this up to the board because they've been asking us to make these changes as we described. And fortunately, like I said, we pushed back and got them to continue the support through until the October pool. And also, again, preliminarily, we've seen that there's not a significant disruption, but again, any disruption by any group still needs to be communicated. So,
and Randy,
any
just
questions?
to clarify too, if there is an employer that has some providers that are out of network, there is an opportunity to be able to contact those providers and request them to be part of the network.
Yeah, good point, Jenny. So what happens is if that's the case and we talk to the employer, we can let them know that if they're a member that could be, affected by that, whatever that provider it could be. Usually, and what we've seen is there's a few chiropractors that are not accepted, and there's a few other individuals that are specialists that may not be accepting it. And then so that if we know that, we can let them know if they talk to their provider and they want to nominate the provider, and the provider applies to be in the PPO network, then Blue Cross can go through their contracting process to add them to it.
Okay, so this is more really for informational purposes at this point, correct, Randy?
It is informational because we don't
do
it. Yes, we're kind of setting the stage just to inform everybody what's what they've told us and what we're doing and what we're going to have to do in 2024. So yes, it's just informational. There's no voting requirement on this piece.
And again, it's just going to be key to that communication point. And I'm glad to hear that there isn't a lot of providers that are affected, but for those that does affect, it will affect our members. So just making sure that there's enough time to inform those providers, give them that opportunity to apply if they see fit. And then if they don't, being able to share with our members, whoever they may be affected. So there's a clear understanding what that means when they continue to be with that provider if they're no longer in the network.
Correct. And so that's that particular piece. The other thing that, since we're talking about administrative things and is, in 2025, we're going to bring this forward, probably at the next board meeting in a little bit more detail, but it's just setting the stage again. Should we consider doing an administrative RFP for the market? Is it time to look at, some of the other competitors, that being health partners, just for due diligence, if not anything else? I will tell you that our experience when we've done this has actually benefited the employer groups pretty significantly, and it's mainly affected stop loss and administrative cost. In other words, we've gotten some pretty competitive reductions. And it's a lift. It's a lot. It's a big, long process that we do. But I think, it could be a benefit to the trust. So again, this is setting the stage for, we'll bring forward what an RFP looks like at the next meeting. If we get the authorization to move forward and to do that. So a lot of employers are, even with Blue Cross, since we're of size, you can carve out stop loss, you can carve out pharmacy. So, many employers, they basically unbundle the services. Blue Cross requires you to be a certain size in order for you to qualify for that, but the trust clearly is in that camp. So again, this is informational to let you know that this is something we're going to bring forward a little bit more detail in the next board meeting. The last item that I have is just we've gotten a few requests. Now, I'll just preface this by saying we do not solicit this, but we do have members that have requested us to educate their insurance committees. And in some cases, they want us to spend a lot of time with those committees. But and our initial effort was really to say, here's your plan options. You can share this with your committee and they can elect to make decisions on it. But in some of the groups, we're finding out that that is kind of evolving to where, hey, thank you for helping us with that. Can you help us with this now? Can you help us with this? And you know, first of all, we're trying to stay within the context of helping them for the purpose of educating them about their medical options within the trust. But it's when they go down these other avenues that we just are, we have to decide, what's our time based on how much time you want us to spend educating your committees and other, stakeholders that perhaps they want us to meet with. So that's, and when this kind of came up in a little bit more accelerated way, again, because we're not out there actively looking for this, it's just that every time we do a renewal cycle, sometimes we're finding that more and more are asking for more information about how to give them advice. There's another element that's positive though, because if we're not there to give them the advice and help them, they may go somewhere else let's say it's an external broker who may not be as interested in keeping them in the trust. Our interest is to keep them in the trust. So we're trying to keep, a close relationship with every decision-making process, particularly around the health insurance. So it's a balance though. So then when they start asking about, plan documents, section 125 compliance, or non-health insurance related compliance questions, I guess where we're getting to is just the idea is, we want to be helpful, but we also want to make it sure everybody knows, okay, this is the scope of what we do. And if it goes beyond this, well, if you want us to consult with your, let's say, your insurance committee, then whatever our time is, we probably need to get paid because it's not anything to do with, the health insurance anymore. It's actually a much bigger, it turns into a project. But we're not really excited necessarily about doing that because we want to stay within the context of what we're trying to do with the trust. So anyway, we wanted to bring it up just because it's we've had a couple groups kind of want us to kind of accelerate that. And anyway, that's the whole purpose, is just to say, is there any kind of advice or direction or thoughts from the board that we can make sure we do this right?
So it's really going beyond the bounds of what our scope is for educating our members. It's not that you don't want to educate them. It's just outside the scope of what we've normally done for our membership. And is that something we as a board want to expand those services? But, to your point, if you're dedicating more staff time to be doing these types of services, there would be a fee that would come with that. And so is that the trust's expense, or is this something that you could state to the members, this is outside the scope of the NDPHIT services that we provide, and then this would be X amount of dollars because it's outside that scope?
Yeah, so like it's a section 125 consulting, and it's $2,500, let's say, that's what it is. And of that money, this is how much, is paid to benefit the trust. Say this is how much money the trust gets, and we're doing this just so you know that it's if it's set up that way, or it's just like, oh, this is our fee for doing the scope of work you're asking for, as a project.
So board members, what are your feelings in regards to either allowing Brown and Brown to, go outside the scope and provide those services, or allowing them to at least charge a fee for those services outside the scope that aren't part of our agreement?
So I'm assuming a lot of these questions are related to the high rates that they're getting. They have to justify it to their elected officials.
They are, no question, Cole.
So I mean,
yeah,
if we're a new organization or political sub coming into this plan, and we've been promised that we're going to keep our rates relatively low, and there's been factors of COVID and other things that have impacted it that are out of our controls, and the plans that they're in, I don't think it's too much for them to ask for some direction, because they haven't been this detailed with the health insurance side of things with their elected officials who they have to answer to. So I mean, you have to decide what that balance is, but I think with the infancy of this NDPHIT, I think it's crucial to have that relationship so that they can get clear answers from you.
Yeah, and we absolutely agree with that. It's just that, you know, it's at what point that when they start asking us questions that are kind of unrelated to that, you know, how do we navigate it? And maybe we just make it clearer, you know, if it's within this scope, everything, we're more than willing to help you and educate. If it goes beyond this, then we probably just ought to have a discussion about it.
I think it's good to create the context, but I'll give the example of, I mean, the vast majority of groups, we spend maybe an hour or two talking about strategy and some ideas that they might want to implement. But we did have a couple of groups where we spent probably 20 plus hours in this renewal cycle trying to educate them on strategy and considerations that they ought to have at the individual group level. So that just kind of gives an example of the, you know, the disparity between our support level for different trust member groups.
And that was educating them on how to reduce their exposure, John, or it was unrelated to their actual plan?
That was basically entirely in relation to their health insurance spend. So, you know, when we provide examples and some different strategy options for them to consider, it basically boiled down to, okay, we have these different groups that we want you to come in and educate and talk to about the different plan options that are available. In some cases that, you know, we did go on site just so that we could try to help out in the best way possible. But yeah, it is all related to the health insurance plan. And obviously, you know, we've talked a lot about with the board here about how important those strategy adoption ideas are. So yeah, I mean, it's very much in the trust best interest that the groups individually are making the best decisions as well as collectively as a whole. Excuse my voice, by the way, I'm recovering from an illness.
I just hate it. I hate to, you know, I get, you know, 20 plus hours seems extreme. I mean, but I think that's, I would hope part of it, if we're asking them to have a 16% increase, that, you know, we're going to spend some time with them to help them problem solve. And it seems like that work has been done. I mean, if they're asking you to come in and go a completely different direction, but if it all stems around the rate increase on how to get their communities to, you know, buy into something, I mean, I think that should go along with what we're asking you to do.
So this is Kyle. Let me jump in here real quick, just to kind of put a different spin on it, just from a board standpoint. So I just got back from a national conference with other service agencies. So there's 47, they're in 47 states. And some of us that have health insurance trusts attached to us had discussions. And I agree with Randy, and Randy and I talked about it a little bit this afternoon at lunch, that they should get paid for their work, right? So that wasn't an issue at all. You know, you should always be paid for your knowledge, just like we try to do at the SEC. On the other hand, it's a slippery slope because our members are our assets. And so as we look to continue to keep our trust healthy, there are a lot of trusts that make money from some of these services that Randy had listed there, that those dollars go back into the trust to make the trust healthy. So I want to make sure as a board that you understand what, you know, just broadly, yeah, here's a situation at the city of Mandan, we don't want to have to spend 30 hours with them. But on the other hand, when we're talking about the asset of our members, we want to make sure that as there are services available and as the dynamics change within the insurance and the other products, the ancillary products, that we're looking at it as a board about how do we improve, how do we offer those services and at the same time improve the health of our access to our members, but the health financially of our trust. So again, we're talking kind of loosely about this and one example or two examples, but there's a lot more information out there that probably should come forward over time to help better understand but what the opportunities are to keep our entity healthy with our members and the services that are provided to them.
So Kyle, at your conference that you went to with the other 47 entities, what was the ratio or were a number of them charging for those types of services that were considered maybe more add-on?
Again, there's a whole variety of things that that I shouldn't be talking about it without having more information to hand out and us have the time to do it. You know, I can bring some of that forward, examples of things. But again, I'm just trying to, I don't know if you're approving something for them to do or not to do. I just want to make sure that you're not, from a board standpoint, you're not giving away opportunities for us to generate revenue to keep our trust healthy. And that you're just handing that over to somebody else without any revenue coming back to us, because we're the ones that are bringing the third party to the table. We should benefit from that too. That's what that collaboration and partnership is all about. Okay, so that it's a philosophy we use at a shared service model here at the SEC. We just don't give away things when we have the asset. We expect something in return.
To that point, Kyle, I was thinking as Randy was talking, and from my perspective, the concern is just as you pointed out, that in any insurance model, your asset is your policyholders. And in allowing access to those policyholders, we're allowing access to the assets of NDPHIT to Brown & Brown. And we, of course, have a relationship with Brown & Brown to provide service to the members of NDPHIT. But the concern I have is what happens where there are blind spots for the trust. Our assets are exposed to a party that in some cases is friendly to us, but are there areas, and I'm not alleging anything on Brown, that Brown & Brown would be doing, but I'm just speaking generally. Are we being blind to some things there that we've got assets exposed to things that we don't necessarily want to have happen? Or could we lose, a member because of, things that are happening? So is there a way that when Brown & Brown provides these services to our member groups, that anything they feel is outside the scope of the agreement between Brown & Brown and NDPHIT, that we receive, I don't know if you want to say an invoice or a listing of what services that they feel is necessary and what their proposed charge would be. And NDPHIT then can facilitate that charge or facilitate an agreement between the NDPHIT members and Brown & Brown. And that way we're in the loop on what's going on. And for now, it could just be a pass-through that we pay Brown & Brown for those services. And then over time, Kyle, to your point, maybe it's something that the trust just takes on. We start looking at saying, well, geez, that service we might be able to take on, and we don't need to have a third-party vendor do it. So you're protecting the trust, but all the while we're still looking at ways that we could compensate Brown & Brown for things that are outside the scope of our current agreement. And to still make it look like it's coming from NDPHIT, not an adjunct to the plan. That's what you're saying, right, Brennan? Yeah, it's part of
I would not recommend us paying the health insurance trust dollars for work outside of the health insurance trust. So I don't agree with that, Brennan, but that's your decision as a board. I would not do that from a leadership standpoint, from a business model standpoint. That would not be something I wouldn't go down that. That's a slippery slope.
I'm saying the dollars would be coming in separate from what they pay for health insurance premiums.
You're talking about the counties would pay us and then we pay Brown & Brown?
Right.
See again, there's so many different levels to talk about this on. That's why I was
I think we need to quantify this, like, why don't you just sort of calculate each time you work with an individual? I mean, the last thing I would want, because I could see, we bring an entity in and then we're like, well, we're only, the clock's starting now or something like that. I mean, only going to help, you only get an hour of our time, and I'm not saying that's what you do or whatever, but I mean that, and then they're like, well, why am I in this? Now I got to pay you extra for that service to figure out what I need to do locally. I mean, that would really, lack of better words, piss me off. And I'd be looking elsewhere. I mean, so I think we need to figure out, is this a problem? Or, you know, because maybe it's not, maybe it's just
what we currently do is what it is.
what's that?
It's work outside the scope of our work and our trust and what we're charging premiums for. Why would you give away money?
I'm not saying that I would, I'm just trying to, you know, is this a problem is what I'm trying to figure out.
I agree, Mike. And that's kind of speaking a little bit to the point I was making is we need to figure out what this is before we start allowing
I agree.
that to happen. I mean, it's kind of anecdotal right now saying, oh, we've spent, 20 hours with this group, or we've done this, we've done that. Let's figure out what it is first, and then we can come up with a plan to make sure that Brown and Brown is compensated for things that they might be performing outside the agreement. And all the while, as Mike spoke to, we're still fulfilling what we felt like the promises to our members were when we started this program.
So Randy, would it be appropriate, I'm thinking it'd be appropriate if you can provide us, what were or what are some of those requests that you had outside the scope, and then not that it needs to be down to the, 5-minute mark, but being able to provide time that was spent in these areas, and then does that, are those things, do we define it as a board? Are those outside the scope? And then how do we handle that moving forward?
Yeah, I could do that. And I agree with, Mike's and Brennan's point. Is it anecdotal? Again, we don't solicit these things. This is not something we're actively, because there's so much more effort on our technical skills that we're trying to focus that benefits the trust and the members at large. So it's just, we just want to be transparent though that it's come about, and I think the best way is just we'll make a list of those things, and determine if the best way to approach it. But once you've got that, then we can act accordingly as to how you'd like us to do it.
Okay, that sounds good. Because if it's 50 different requests and it's taking up 270 hours of your time, we have an issue we need to discuss.
Yeah, but I can tell you that. So
right. Exactly. But it would be nice to know what you're dealing with from that standpoint. So, okay. We are beyond the 2-hour mark, and I know we only have a couple of things to finish up for our board meeting. So Nora, if you could review the financials for us, that would be great.
Okay, let's see if I can share my screen so you can see this one. Oh, that's not the one. Can you see which?
Yep, that is the financials. Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to start with the income statement first. This time just to switch it up a little bit. So you can see earned premium for the month was 4.6 million. We didn't have any rebates. We calculate quarterly. So for the first 3 quarters, we were at 1.9 million for the rebates through the year. We got the wellness screening credit of 100,000 in there now. You can see stop loss reimbursement has been higher this year. And I think some of that was on a lag. But overall, our loss ratio was better for October, but we're still year to date at 97%. So it's basically like our operations are just taking care of itself, because our operating ratio is at 3% still. So it's like whatever we bring in basically goes out to claims and expenses for the trust. But anything then that we're getting through interest income, which has gone up exponentially since we switched to go over to First International, and then getting those CDs has been wonderful. Our cash interest has been up to 236,000 year to date. Last year we had like 45 through the entire year, so that definitely helps having that. But so far, so October was a much better month than we'd had, but year to date we're still in the black, about 557,000. So that's been good. December, we don't have November's numbers yet. It's too close to month end, but December is typically our highest month for claims, or it has been in the last couple of years, just due to everyone trying to get stuff in before the year end, especially for our January groups, whose policy ends at the end of the year. They try and get those appointments and stuff done before the end of the year if their deductible's already been met. But so far still in the black year to date through October. So that's good news, $500,000 there. And what that translates to on the balance sheet is you can see we've got over 8.4 million between the cash accounts and the CDs. And one thing I think I'm going to start doing is actually showing more in the operating cash and kind of using the CDs, you know, because we don't have to, it's all unrestricted as far as those deposits that came in from members. We're not required to give them back. We're tracking them for our own purposes for things that might happen down the road. However, that actually is probably the best cash to say we're using for investment purposes to earn some funds on it while we've got it, while we're holding it. So I'm probably going to use that deposit cash and use that into our CDs and show it that way. And then we'd show our operating cash is a little bit higher, just because it makes sense to use to kind of that concept of using what our members have given us and try and earn some interest on it while we're holding it. But overall, really still cash heavy. It probably wouldn't hurt while those CD rates are still high to invest another at least $500,000 going. I mean, at 8.4, we can easily have 2 million in CDs if you guys approve of Brenna getting a couple more of those. And she has been staggering them. We've renewed some that have come that have matured, but that interest has been wonderful. And if we continue to do that where they stagger, so if we ever would need the funds, it wouldn't be long before one of them matures. But to just continue to get those 4.5, 5, sometimes 5.25 interest rates on those CDs has been beneficial. So something to think about as a board, if you would want to approve her to do another about $500,000 into CDs would be, in my opinion, good for the trust, good for income generation. But overall, we're looking at pharmacy rebates of 1.2. So total assets of 9.6. And again, 8.4 of that is all liquid, all cash that's available basically, because those CDs all mature within the next year. Liabilities, we probably are light on IBNR reserve. We left it at what it ended last year. We won't adjust that until we have an actuary look at it, but it is something to think about that's probably light just because there has been more activity with more groups in there. So it probably is going to increase when we get that actuary report done after year end. But overall, looking at membership equity of 5.2 million. So, I mean, all of the member deposits are completely still intact, which again, those aren't required to be there. They are considered unrestricted assets. You can do with them what you will. But so right now sitting in a good spot financially. So it's always nice to see.
So Nora, for the investment piece into CDs, the board did approve you the flexibility, I think you and Brenna, the flexibility to be able to invest funds into CDs on behalf of the trust. If we do another 500,000, is that still within what we approved for you all to do that? Or do we need formal board approval to do an additional 500,000? And again, if you're feeling that there's enough cash on hand to be able to take care of the expenses, we obviously don't want to get ourselves in a position where we don't have, you know, available cash to be able to pay the expenses. But I'm thinking if we can maximize our return on investment in CDs, which are, you know, very stable investments.
Absolutely.
I don't see why we wouldn't want to do that.
Right. And Brenna, I don't know, like, because I know we didn't want to set a certain dollar amount or what the board decided as a final policy as far as allowing Brenna and I the flexibility. If there was some kind of restriction, if we said, you know, up to 1.5 is fine or wherever you feel, but I don't know where it was at, where we landed. So that's why I ask. I don't know if we need another approval, or Brenna, do you know, is the investment policy allow us enough to put another $500,000 in there? Or I don't know how that was.
Well, the policy that we just approved says 3% of the annual premium income we can invest without telling the board or without consulting the board. And so that is a little higher than what we have in there, but I don't think it's another 500,000. Right. But of course, you could always approve us to.
Right. The board can approve to go, you know, above the policy due to, you know, current interest rates and allowing us to have, you know, 2 million in CDs at the current time.
Yes.
And I know we've had to do that with our board where they approve something that might be above what, you know, the current policy states, you know, due to a specific reason.
I think
as long as the board is aware and it's noted in the minutes.
I'll make the motion to invest an additional $500,000, not to exceed 12 months.
So moved or seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, those not in favor of doing the
I'll
500.
second it, Sonia.
Oh, thanks, Sonia. We've got a couple of seconds, but that's okay. So being no further discussion, those not in favor of investing an additional $500,000 in CDs signify by saying aye. Okay, motion has passed. Thank you, Nora, for doing a great job in doing an overview of our investments. It's good to see we're in the black. Always good to see.
Sorry, I talk fast, but I know you guys have been here for a while too. It's one of those, try and cruise through, but always feel free to interrupt and ask questions.
No, that's okay. Appreciate it. And then last but certainly not least is our next NDPHIT board meeting is scheduled for January 31st at 3. I do have a request from the board. And again, if this date doesn't work for you all, let me know. I actually am going to be hosting our county engineers and highway superintendents on that day in Fargo, the 31st through the 2nd. So I will not be available for that board meeting, and was wondering if the 29th of January would be open for everyone, if we would move it to Monday, the 29th from 3 to 4. If that doesn't work for the majority of the board members, I have 100% confidence that Mike, as vice chair, would be able to handle the meeting, but thought I would throw it out there if that would work for everyone.
Mike, when is the midwinter conference?
On the 29th.
Okay. And again, we could keep it as of the 31st, or if we'd want to look at the following week of February 5th through the 9th.
If we could piggyback off the midwinter conference, that'd be fantastic.
Is that just a one-day conference, Kevin, or how long does that go?
I'm pretty sure it's a 2-day.
Okay.
I don't know the dates offhand though.
And again, if the 31st works for the majority of that, that's totally fine with me, but just Mike, to let you know that you would be chairing that board meeting. Are you good with that, Mike?
Seems fine. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just keep it as of the 31st, and then I'll just watch the recording after the conference. So want to thank everyone for their time. I really tried to keep it under 2 hours, but I see I didn't quite make it. But anyway, appreciate everybody's time, and want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And we will see you all in January with our new board member, whoever that may be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.